Going back to the oldest games on the SNES, Nintendo 64, PlayStation, and even the DOS ones on the computer, I have always been drawn to video game music. My appreciation for it has grown over the years to the point where I just have it on in the background. Certainly, it is at its most powerful and effective when playing the game itself and feeling immersed in its world. In a discussion I had with Taysin's Gaming Spot on one of his videos, I think he said it best. Soundtracks made for video games are designed to help convey emotions during so many different parts of the game that vary in extremes, and also dynamically shift in tone and melody depending on what you do or where you go to. Much like part 1 of this trilogy, I decided to look back at the games I've played and pick my top 10 soundtracks. Whether a soundtrack got in was based on criteria I came up with. 1. The soundtrack has to come from a game I've completed. And 2. The majority of the tracks in the game have to be exceptional to me. So for example, I haven't played, let alone completed, Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, and even then I've only heard one of its tracks, the music for the Sky Tower, which I quite like. It was very hard to keep it to 10, though it was a fun challenge. And I imagine your list will be quite different from my own, especially considering my slight preference for Nintendo systems. So get those ears ready, let's get on with the list. 10! One reason to argue that video games can be considered art is the music, and the proof of that is with, to mostly choose one example, the soundtrack for Shadow of the Colossus. Much like designer Fumito Ueda's other games Ico and The Last Guardian, music is used sparingly here, but when you hear it... There are many epic grandiose tracks with good orchestral arrangements. I especially like how the music changes when you get close to defeating a Colossus. Overall, this game's soundtrack is emotional. 9! There are those who say video game music, especially when it's calm and ambient, is good for playing in the background when doing studying, homework, researching, writing and creative work. One example is Machinarium. The music is generally surreal, abstract and enchanting. The compositions are well done with nice electronic instrumentation. One of the highlights is the piano work on the track Behind the Wall. It is nice how calm the soundtrack is considering the puzzle solving featured in the game. There are of course other games that do that, but that's for another list. Also, there had to be a dubstep track. 8! Ingredients for a good soundtrack. 2 franchises that generally have good music, and of course gameplay, fused together. I'm talking of course about Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars. Composer Yoko Shimomura incorporated arrangements and elements from the Mario and Final Fantasy games of the time. The result? A solid soundtrack. There are good remixes of tunes from Mario games, but it is really the original tracks where the soundtrack is at its best. I do have one small complaint though, and that is the repetitive nature of the battle music, but even then, they don't sound too bad. Plus, the majority of the soundtrack is great. 7! Isolation, exploring an alien world, and looking for secrets. These are the sensations one would surely feel from the Metroid Prime soundtrack. It is moody, atmospheric with good electronic instrumentation and melody. I really like the music that you hear when fighting space pirates. And the bosses. The remixes and arrangements of past Metroid tunes are not only, as composer Kenji Yamamoto put it, a present for fans of the series, but work so well in establishing setting and mood that even someone who didn't necessarily play early Metroid titles like myself can appreciate and accept as part of the Metroid canon. Now, the soundtracks from other Metroid titles I played are also excellent, but there's just something about the immersive nature of the first game in the Metroid Prime trilogy that makes it stand out for me. There are composers out there who develop a cult following, especially for their resume of varied tracks and musical styles. One such composer is David Wise, and his work on Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Conquest stands out for me. It has been said multiple times how good tracks such as Mining Melancholy, Forest Interlude, and of course Sticker Brush Symphony are. But it's true. In fact, this soundtrack is to me better than the previous Donkey Kong Country, which is quite a call to make. David Wise's trademark techniques are here, including environmental sounds and percussion, not to mention the ambient jungle influences. I especially love the variety and how the somewhat darker tone this sequel has over its predecessor is reflected in the music. 5! Surely Banjo-Kazooie had to be on this list somewhere, right? It is because the title of the game references the musical instruments of a banjo and kazoo. More than that, it is just an exceptional piece of work by Grant Kirkhope. It is charming, catchy, and full of whimsy. It may sound cliche to even say this, but the music complements every moment and environment. You could listen to a track such as Treasure Trove Cove or Bubble Gloop Swamp without playing the game or knowing the track title, and it sets the tone for where you are, complete with good sound effects and melodies. Easily one of its strongest aspects is how the style of music gradually changes without pause. The first Super Mario Bros. Did not have this sort of tune changing technique, such as when you run on land only to subsequently swim underwater. I may be cheating a bit with this entry, and no, it's not the whole Legend of Zelda series, which does have good music overall. This entry consists of the two soundtracks for Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. Which, to be fair, share a lot of tracks, some of which any gamer will surely recognise, such as Saria's Song, or Son of Storms. Some of the tracks exclusive to either game are great, including Gerudo Valley, Forest Temple, and Kokiri Forest in Ocarina of Time, or Clock Town, Stone Tower, and the Song of Healing in Majora's Mask. Speaking of the Song of Healing, the fact that you play that and other memorable melodies yourself is important to the overall experience of the game. Plus, people around the world have played other melodies, such as well-known TV tunes on the Ocarina. Did Koji Kondo plan that? 3! Generally, RPGs will have that one general tune for towns, or that one general tune for battles and so on. Not Earthbound, which features on this list for the variety alone. The soundtrack is so eclectic. There are several battle tunes which generally complement every enemy and boss you fight. Plus, at least one of them is kind of fun to dance to. Plus, every town has its own tune, including Onett, Tucson, and Fourside. The soundtrack is consistently well composed and complements the charm and weirdness of the game. Some of it's also emotional, complete with one of my favourite end credits tunes of any game, Smiles and Tears. Much of the qualities of his soundtrack would be replicated to good effect in Mother 3, but somehow I prefer Earthbound. And I did mention the weirdness, right? I guess I'm into weird things. Before playing the Final Fantasy series for the first time, it was no secret that the series generally had exceptional music. And having completed, to this date, Final Fantasy IV, aka 2 the easy version, Final Fantasy VI, aka 3, and Final Fantasy VII, it is true. All three of them were great, but one clearly stood out. Final Fantasy VII. Now, it can be argued that other Final Fantasy soundtracks such as 8, which I haven't played, or 6, which I have played, may be better or underrated, but 7's big catalogue of tracks that are generally memorable and emotional win in my book. Composer Nobuo Uematsu did an exceptional job, and his ambition to make it more like a film soundtrack does, to sound cliched again, set the mood. There are epic tracks. There are understated tracks. The battle tune can be considered repetitive, but I just love it. In regards to the battles, I especially love how some music tracks keep on going, rather than simply switching to the battle tune. Which makes for great emotion and mood. The variety of musical genres is incredible, which is best represented in the final boss music, One Winged Angel, with its combination of classical and rock, and a Latin choir. If the transition from synthesizer sounds to studio sounds didn't help to make tracks like that give a sense of doom, or allow for tracks that would make us cry, then video game music wouldn't be what it is today. Before we go on to number 1, I want to name several honourable mentions. These soundtracks were close to getting into my top 10. It is almost hard to know what to say about Chrono Trigger's soundtrack that would do it justice. Keeping in mind I haven't completed Chrono Cross, though what I've heard does sound really good. It has been said on countless occasions that the soundtrack is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, in all of gaming. And it is not hard to see why. Well, what are some of my favourite tracks in the game? The main theme? Peaceful Days? Corridors of Time? Frog's theme? Wind scene? Even the battle music is great, plus the music for the battle with Magus is probably one of my favourite boss battle tunes in video games. Hearing the music when seeing how bleak the future time period is does make me feel at least a little sad, and I wish I could think of the right superlatives to describe the ending theme to faraway times. But this soundtrack is more than just a list of exceptional tunes, many of which complement each character, moment, or even setting or time period. The decision to make tunes last for an average of 2 minutes to avoid looping as much as possible, as well as the use of leitmotif for consistency, demonstrate the art of composing music, which makes Chrono Trigger more than just a game to play with. Overall, it is the story behind Yasunori Mitsuda's work on the music that makes this soundtrack number one for me. He asked to compose music, otherwise he would leave Square, and Chrono Trigger was the game suggested for him. He worked hard on the music, even when losing tracks after a hard drive crash, to the point of feeling ill. Even with those hardships in mind, I can pick up the slightest hint of passion or excitement of Mitsuda in the main theme and other tracks. That is inspiring to me on an emotional and creative level. Plus, this soundtrack spans 3 discs, which is pretty impressive. Simply put, it is one of the greatest video game music soundtracks ever crafted. Well, that was an interesting take on video game music, and I hope you found it interesting too. I'm keen to know what your favourites are. Now, for the final part of this trilogy, where I'm going to decide my 30 favourite video games from my timeline, the timeline from part 1. This is going to be a fairly lengthy video, so I think you should prepare some food and drink. So have a good day or night or whatever it is, and I'll see you then.